On Tuesday, the 25th of June, Southwest Airlines apparently took off on a closed runway before the tower was opened in Portland, Maine. When you're in the media barrel, you're there until somebody else screws up, and right now it's Southwest's turn. Here's what we know so far. When you think of a closed runway, you often think of the big, bright, lighted X on the end of the runway or a yellow X painted over the numbers of the runway. But sometimes runways are closed by NOTAM, or Notice to Airmen. Politically correct has been renamed to Notice to Air Missions. Even though the FAA has changed the name of the acronym to NOTAMs, they have not changed the clumsy way in which NOTAMs are delivered to pilots, adding to the confusion of this situation. And this is a situation that could happen to any of us, especially flying the line to airports without an operational control tower. Starting with the Aviation Herald, here was Simon Radecki. A Southwest Boeing 737-700 registered November 7861 Juliet performing flight as Southwest Flight 4805 from Portland, Maine to Baltimore, Maryland, departed Portland's runway 29. That's the critical thing. It was one particular runway was closed, not the entire airport, at 5:43 local, 943Z, when both runway and tower were still closed, not both runways, when the one runway and the tower was closed. And it was to be opened by 5:45, so only a couple minutes later was the tower to open. The aircraft continued to Baltimore for a landing without further incident. Airport operations can be heard on the tower frequency opening the runway about 2 minutes after Southwest's departure and asking tower whether they could get a hold of Southwest airplane that had just taken off over them while they were doing a runway inspection. So apparently there was a vehicle on the runway at the time that Southwest took off. Tower responded they never talked to him and they weren't yet open. We'll get to the ATC audio in a minute. According to NOTAMs, only Portland's runway 1836 would have been available at the time. So there's two runways at Portland. The 1836 runway was open, no problem, but the 29 runway was closed. The FAA released a statement on 29 June saying Southwest Airlines Flight 4805 departed from the temporarily closed runway at Portland International Jetport on Tuesday, June 25th. An airport vehicle exited the runway before the plane began its takeoff roll. The FAA and NTSB are investigating the event, which occurred about 5:45 a.m. local time. And here's a copy of the NOTAM. Portland's runway 1129 closed except crossing and taxiing through Friday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday from 0230 to 0945 Z time. Now, the problem with these NOTAMs, if you're a general aviation pilot, the NOTAMs come up a little easier. If you're using a program like ForeFlight, you just click on the NOTAMs thing, and the relatively important NOTAMs will rise to the top of the NOTAM search. But in airline operations, these rather cryptic NOTAMs are usually buried under a blizzard of paperwork way deep down after the flight plan, and they're buried with a bunch of non-essential items like things about towers located here and there and things that have been going on with the airport for years and years. So one of the problems, ongoing problems with the NOTAM system, and this has been noted by the NTSB for years, is the way that they are disseminated to the pilots. And here's the reason for the NOTAM. They're rehabilitating runway 1129. Looks like they're adding additional grooving to the runway. And so they're closing it at night to get this work done. And then they reopen it during the day. And on some of the days, it looks like both runways are closed as they work on the intersection of the two runways. Portland, Maine is located right down here. And we can see that it's on the sectional chart, which airline pilots don't use. You can see it's a blue airport, so it's got a tower, but next to the control tower frequency, it's got a star, which means that the tower is not open 24 hours a day. And the airspace surrounding the airport is Class C, controlled airspace. Here's a look at the airport diagram for Portland. Again, we see Portland Tower with a star on 120.9, indicating that the tower is not open 24 hours. You have to look further to find the hours of operation of the control tower. And here's the closed runway in question, runway 11 and runway 29. Runway 36 and runway 18 was open at the time of the incident. Okay, now let's get to the ATC audio. Here on PPRUM, the Professional Pilots Rumor Network, BFS Grad has done a good breakdown of the audio transmissions as they're fairly garbled and hard to understand here from real ATC. Again, this is at the Portland Tower frequency 120.9, which is currently, the tower is currently closed, so everybody is broadcasting in the blind or treating it as what I would call a Unicom frequency.
Southwest, are you on frequency?
I believe that's Brickyard. There's two aircraft fixing to depart the Portland airport, and I think that's Brickyard following Southwest and asking him if they're up on the frequency.
Portland track Brickyard 5760 trailing at Southwest, taxiing to runway 36 via Charlie, crossing 2911 at Charlie, Portland traffic.
Okay, so that's Brickyard. He's going to runway 36, the open runway, as he knows that the other runway is closed, and he's explaining his intentions of how he's going to get there.
Portland traffic, airport vehicle, just be advised, we're seated for an on-time opening here of runway 29er, but it's going to remain closed until schedule 545.
So Airport Ops is advising that runway 29 is still closed on the Unicom frequency, but apparently Southwest is not up on the frequency.
And the Southwest pulling on to 29, just so you know, there is a vehicle on the runway still, and it is closed.
Just to let you know, there is a vehicle on the runway for the Southwest that's pulling out on runway 29.
I tried warning him.
I tried to warn him.
Tower up on top. Did you ever get a hold of that Southwest plane once he's airborne, or is he still kind of MIA in that regard?
Austin 5, stand by one, it's on the line. Austin 5, no, we never talked to the aircraft because we technically not open there until 45, so never did talk to him.
I just didn't know if you had him on departure frequency currently.
No, he's up and out. He went with the center the whole way.
So that explains exactly what happened. The Southwest aircraft was on the center frequency getting his IFR clearance and never did switch over to the Unicom frequency the entire time before departure.
I'm not feeling pleased on his departure.
I'm not either, considering you were on the runway and had to exit, wasn't even on the CTAF. I heard that as well.
Wouldn't that technically count as a deviation too?
So that's Ops and Tower talking to each other about what just happened and are considering a possible deviation against the pilot. Now we get the other side of the story, the center frequency, which I have not found on live ATC, but again, BFS Grad here on PPRUN has broken down the transcript, and it sounds like Southwest was talking to center the whole time. SWA, center Southwest 4805, center Southwest 4805, Boston Center, Southwest. Yes, sir, on the ground at Portland will be number 1 for departure, runway 29, and of course the actual transcript will be time date stamped. Center, Roger, standby. Center, Southwest 4805, amend altitude on departure, climb and maintain 4,000 feet. You are released for departure. That's not a clearance for takeoff. That's just you're released for your IFR departure. Clearance void if not off in 3 minutes. They can only keep that airspace clear for about 3 minutes before somebody else is going to stumble into that airspace and interfere with the IFR departure. Now this is, even though the weather is good out there today, this is assuming IFR conditions, IMC conditions, clouds you can't see. That's why the radar controller, the center, is keeping everybody separated. If not off in 3 minutes, advise Boston Center no later than 5 minutes of intentions. Southwest, copy that, change altitude to 4,000 feet, void in 3 minutes, we're ready to go. So there's your kind of time compression element right there. Now here's the Brickyard aircraft that we heard earlier that was doing the correct procedure of transmitting on both the Unicom or the tower frequency, the unopened tower frequency, and center at the same time. So this is Brickyard. Boston Center, Brickyard 5760, number 1 at runway 36, the correct runway, the open runway, for departure at Portland. Center. Brickyard 5760, Boston Center. Roger, continue to hold. I got one rolling now. And Brickyard responds, copy that. He's referring to Southwest. Southwest. Center, Southwest 4805, 1.2 for 4,000 feet. He's taken off and climbing out. Center, Southwest 4805, you're in radar contact, just 1 mile west of Portland. Climb and maintain flight level 340. Southwest acknowledges that clearance. And Center, Southwest 4805, out of 3,000 feet, clear direct to Nelly. Southwest, out of 3,000, direct Nelly. Southwest 4805. And an unknown, somebody says in a soft transmission, did he just take off from a closed runway? And some other unknown source says, yes. And then Center says, I'm sorry, last calling, say again, I was on a line with Portland. Center, Southwest 4805, Boston. Southwest, yeah, go ahead. Center, just trying to check, did you depart runway 2829? Southwest, we did depart runway 29. Center, that runway was closed. Southwest, I thought it opened at 45. There were no markings anywhere. So therein lies a lot of the confusion. So how this is supposed to work is that, well, each airplane has two radios, two VHF radios. I call them Victor 1 and Victor 2. So on one radio, you're going to need to get a hold of the local center. It's none of these frequencies here. You're going to have to look somewhere else to get that local center frequency to get your IFR clearance. Hopefully it'll be in the company literature on your Jepsons on board the aircraft. So you get a hold of the center frequency, you tell them who you are, where you are, and what you want to do, and they will issue you an IFR clearance with a void if not off time. So because it's clearance and not a tower, they're clearing the airspace around you to do your IFR departure, but they're not clearing you for takeoff. They're only clearing you for your IFR clearance. So on the other radio, either the other pilot or you need to switch back and forth the frequencies. On the other radio, somebody needs to continually monitor the Portland Tower frequency, which 120.9, which I technically call a Unicom frequency at this point, and make sure that the traffic is clear and advise other people on the airport of what your intentions are. So once you have your IFR clearance and your void if not off time, which can be as short as 3 minutes from as soon as you get your clearance, you are your own clearance authority for taking off. The IFR clearance is not a takeoff clearance in itself. So when Southwest said he thought it was open at 45, it indicates to me that he was well aware of the NOTAM, but because we hear no transmissions from Southwest on 120.9, they apparently were not up on the local frequency here and thus did not get the word that they were not quite ready for that runway to be fully opened yet. There was still an ops truck on the runway who cleared the runway before Southwest took off. So these sort of operations in uncontrolled or when the tower is closed sort of operations, especially at night. Now this is morning and it's daylight at the time of this incident, can be full of pitfalls and traps for airline pilots, especially airline pilots that haven't done a lot of general aviation flying recently or never had a lot of general aviation experience in dealing with Unicom type situations or situations where there is no control tower. Oftentimes, it's best to break these radio frequencies up where the one pilot is dealing with center and getting the clearances, and the other pilot is dealing with the local Unicom frequencies. You got to be very, very careful in these sort of situations. This could happen to any of us. Thank you so much for your support of this channel, especially the folks over on Patreon that make this content possible. See you here. Back to work.